Welcome to the A.D.H. Deep Dive, the show that's not about ADHD, but is filled with proof that it exists. I'm David J. Mund. I'm an actor, director, musician, cinematographer, and ginger. And on this episode, I talked to Zak L'Italien. He's an acoustical consultant living out in LA, and though he doesn't play music as much as he once did, he's one hell of a musician as well. Most importantly to me, though, he's an old friend. And on this episode, we talk about our formative years in band class, the mentors we've encountered along the way, and how we see now that those experiences have shaped us. So thank you for joining me on this episode of the A.D.H. Deep Dive. And let's dive in, shall we?
I actually want to be able to eat because I know I'm not that good to where I'd be able to make a solid profession out of this.
I want you to take that back.
All right, taking it back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was never a talent thing, but there is, of course, there's a hurdle to being a paid musician straight out of high school. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Don't you slander your musical abilities. Not on my podcast.
Well, I think back to those times and I'm like, I think about how much work I put into music, and I really see a lot of benefit that came from that.
Yep.
However, today I am not as good of a musician as I once was.
That's
I've lost a bunch. Some of the muscle memory is still there, but if you asked me to do the same range on a trombone that I once had,
sure.
No way.
So first of all, just to excuse that away, that comes with anything, right? You don't practice, You don't retain it with anything. It's just muscle memory. But we might as well just kind of bring it back to the band as a baseline anyway, because that's where you and I we knew each other in middle school, maybe as far back as elementary school, but my first memories of you are coming out of middle school into high school.
So I was actually thinking about that the other day. And I think, I actually went over to your house a few times in elementary school.
You went to my house?
Yeah, because you lived in the same neighborhood as Dylan, and I was at Dylan's house all the time.
Yeah, but you came over to my house?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. You knew right where I lived. So if you have that memory, then it's probably valid, but that's wild. Yeah, because we were talking on the phone the other day, and we said that the first real visceral memory we have is mid to late middle school at 5 a.m. on the track.
Yeah.
We were just a bunch of hooligan kids out way too late. But I guess, okay, so we knew each other when we were kids. But the way I remember interacting with you on a more regular basis was through our band and jazz band classes. Because you were in jazz band, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I think we overlapped 2 years?
2 years. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Man, and what a good 2 years that was, because we touched on this on our phone call the other day, but having Frank Youngman as a band teacher or as a musical instructor is pretty directly responsible for a lot of my not necessarily career paths, but hobby choices going forward in life. I still use a lot of the stuff that I learned from him in my daily life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, he's had a lot of influence on me, and even my friends from college, my friends from college who've never met this man, know more about this man than a lot of people know about any other human being.
I love that.
I don't know. It's just I've got very fond memories of his classes and my interactions with Frank.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think he's honestly responsible for a lot of the compassion that I have for other people.
Yeah.
And just not blowing up when people mess up or
patience on that man.
Yeah, the patience. Yeah. And I think I got a lot of that honestly through him, which is cool, and it serves you well professionally. And then there are other instances where I'm like, oh man, I'm too patient. Like sometimes things
Yeah.
need to be pressed and I'm like
Yeah.
hesitant. I'm like, no, I want to make this person feel uncomfortable.
It's really interesting that you say that. In the conversation I just had with my buddy George, coming from a different creative direction, he was actually directing a film project, and he had that same impression that like he learned a lot of like patience and discipline, but like you don't know when to apply it in the right way on a creative project. Like you don't know when to kind of stand up for yourself and speak your mind, or kind of sit back and be part of the group and like let things
Yeah.
unfold on their own. But
There's
yeah,
certainly a balance.
for context, so Frank Youngman was our music teacher. You started fresh out the gate in 6th grade, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Fresh out the gate.
you had the like 5th grade sit down audition with him. Do you remember that?
Yeah. It was, I don't know if it was directly with him. It may have been with him. I think it was maybe someone from like Marshall Music.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And they like went into a room and like they had a bunch of mouthpieces and they're like, oh yeah, let me like check out how you buzz on this mouthpiece and
Yeah.
like can you you know make a sound with this reed mouthpiece and so it was just like, oh yeah, I think you're a trombone player. And I'm like, okay,
Sure.
cool.
All right. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because up until that point, the only class that we had that was even remotely musically explorative was our music class in elementary school, which is just like blowing into recorders and learning how to play a few notes on the xylophone and everybody sings.
Yeah.
But that was the first time. Yeah, I do remember, because in our school it was the elementary school and the high school were combined, and then the middle school was separate. So our last few days in 5th grade, we met with, or at least I did. You might have met with somebody from Marshall Music.
I probably did meet with Frank.
You just don't know at the time.
Yeah.
You're just a kid and you're like, somebody's giving me instruments to play, so I'll do it.
Yeah.
So Frank sat down. He's like, hi, I'm Mr. Youngman. What are some things that you might want to play if you join band? And I just remember I had no musical gifts or signs of gifts at this point. So it was literally just, throw it at the wall and see whatever sticks. So I just said a bunch of instruments that I knew, and of course landed on drums. So he has you like tapping to see if you can like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and then has you blow into a few reeds and mouthpieces just to see if you even have the ability to understand how to play an instrument. And then you go the whole summer without knowing what you're gonna do. Like he writes a couple things down on a piece of paper. He's like, all right, buddy, we'll see you next year. And then the summer goes by and I enter a class and I found out that I'm actually scheduled to play the trumpet. So how different my life would have been if I would have stuck with that. But I remember day one being like, I don't know if I want to do that. Like, I think I got so excited over that summer about possibly being able to play the drums that I was like, let's do the drums. And then from there on, the rest is history. But do you remember any of your potential instruments, or was it very quickly like, you're going to play trombone?
Well, I think my recollection is I wanted to play the trumpet. I like when I was like, yeah, the trumpet's a pretty cool instrument.
Yeah.
And then I don't think I was like disappointed or anything that I like played the trombone. In fact, I was like, I don't know, this thing is like way different than any of the other instruments, because all the other ones have like, pistons and like you're tapping on keys and things like that. And I was like, I'm part of the only section in this band that's different. Like we've got this big long thing that we're like, yeah, exactly. So I was like, that's pretty cool. I could probably make some pretty cool noises with this. And yeah, it's.
I have specific memories of you bouncing around though too, or at least being proficient in trumpet and tuba. Like, where did that come into play? When did that experimenting start?
I just had like an interest. I think I want to say the earliest that I started playing, at least playing around with trumpet, was maybe in like 8th grade. And then, I mean, it's all the same, right? It's just kind of like the you just have to like associate. For me, it was like associating the slide positions with what is the equivalent of that note, but in a fingered form, which is like a whole different thing, and it's like a lot to get into for this, and I'm not entirely clear. Like,
No, let's do a deep dive on music theory.
yeah, no. I'd
The
rather
crash
not.
course.
It's Sunday. This is my relaxing day. No, but anyway, yeah, I think about eighth grade is when I started fiddling around with the trumpet, and then I was like super interested in it, right? And then I want to say the tuba came in when I believe it was like for a graduation ceremony. The one of the regular tuba players like could not make it that year. And I think we were in like desperate need of a tuba, like pomp and circumstance, and like just
Yeah, sure. 3 hours of the same song over and over again.
And so I remember, and maybe I'm like making this story up, but I have this vivid recollection that like we didn't have a tuba player, and then I was like, oh shoot, what are we gonna do? And I'm like, I can play tuba.
You step up to the plate. I can do it.
Why not? It's like the same thing.
I think I remember
trombone, except it's a little bigger.
I remember that same moment. You were wearing a cape. It was flapping in the wind. You were flying.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Just want to make sure.
I think that's when I like was like, man, yeah, I could probably pick up the tuba pretty quickly. And I think that was more out of necessity rather than explicit interest, although I was very interested in it. But the tuba is a big instrument. Like
huge.
I don't really like traveling with my trombone. And this past December, I went up to Seattle for a conference. And at that conference, there's this thing. It's called the Jam. It's basically 4 hours of all the people at the conference. They've got their instruments, and we just go up and
just
jam.
Jamming. Hell yeah,
it's great.
Sign me up. That's great.
But I'm not gonna travel with my trombone to Seattle when I've got to like bring other things.
Sure.
So the trumpet, as you know, is a lot more compact, easier to manage.
I have kind of a two-part question. So like, if somebody comes up to you now and says, what do you do? How do you answer that? And B, is that what you want to say that you do, or is that just where you get your income? So I guess we'll start with the first part. If somebody says, Zak L'Italien, what do you do?
Yeah, this is good. This is a good question. I actually have this same discussion with my colleagues because a lot of people don't know what we do. We kind of work behind the scenes a lot. And I haven't even told you what I do yet. So I'm really behind the scenes right now.
Kind of. You've told.
I've told you, David Mund, but I haven't
the
told
view. Okay.
Audience.
Yeah, but that's why. I want to kind of establish what it is you did, then talk about what you do and where that gap came into play.
Yeah.
So
this is good. So I work as an acoustical consultant. And
acoustical consultant.
Yes. I'm an acoustical consultant. And basically what that means, and a lot of people will like misinterpret this as, oh, you're the guy on the mixing console in a performance, and that's not the case. I work with architects and engineers to design buildings. Primarily, I primarily work in architectural acoustics and building systems noise control. And essentially what that means is I collaborate with design teams and we review drawings and we analyze the constructions that are being used and the materials that are being used in those constructions and estimate things like what is the room, what are the room acoustics going to be like? How long is sound going to persist in the space? where is sound propagating throughout the space? Is it propagating in a useful manner? Is it being reflected and redirected in a useful manner? Is it being absorbed where it needs to be absorbed? Those types of things. Mechanical systems are HVAC. It can be other types of mechanical systems. We often deal in elevators as well, and noise control for that.
Okay.
But so if you're in a concert hall, you want to be able to hear what's going on stage. You don't want to hear the air moving through ductwork and eventually making its way into the space and raising the background noise level of that space, and thus making the musical experience less enjoyable for the audience. So I deal a lot in controlling.
Do you work like so have you gone into like theaters and arenas and stuff to do some of the works there?
Oh yeah. My firm primarily focuses on performing arts centers.
Does some of this come from the education, or is this like when you went to Michigan Tech, what was the degree specifically for, and were these the types of jobs that you were looking for?
Yeah. So when I went to Michigan Tech, as you know, I was like very involved with music, and I wanted to kind of like keep that up. And I also wanted some math and science like kind of mixed in there.
Mm-hmm.
So audio production technology is the degree path I went into. And I thought like, oh yeah, this is going to be great. I'm going to get like a lot of like math and science of like how audio works, and that'll be great. When I entered the program, I realized, there are like several different kind of like branches that I could take, and several of them are like not as math and sciencey as I was hoping for. So I talked with my advisor, who is like really great, like in terms of like impact on myself. He's right up there with like Frank Youngman.
Great. Somebody through that you met through Michigan Tech?
Yeah, he was my academic advisor, and Chris Plummer, I was talking with him, and I think this was like in my first year, maybe my second year. He was like, Zach, all right, let's sit down and chat. What do you want to do when you leave these buildings? What do you want to do? Like, how do you want to make your living? I was like, well, honestly, Chris, when I first started here, I was like, man, maybe I want to do like studio production or live sound, and like, I don't know. And he's like, okay, well, do you still want to do that? And I'm like, no, well, no, not really. It's not like, I'm not very passionate about it. Like, I enjoy doing it, but I don't really care for it all that much.
Sure.
Like, I didn't care for it as much as I thought I would. And he's like, well, do you feel like you're like lacking anything? I was like, well, the music part, I think I'm getting enough of that. But honestly, like, I kind of miss like the math and sciencey portions, and I really want to understand how sound, like the human experience. I want to understand what's going on. Why do certain rooms sound the way they do, and why do we like certain sounds, and why do we not like other sounds? And he said, we should probably like mold your curriculum to like focus more on acoustics, like natural acoustics, and that sort of thing. It's going to be a lot of math. It's going to be a lot of physics.
Nerd.
And
I'm just kidding.
No, seriously. And I was like, well, like, that kind of sounds fun. And so it was indeed a lot of math and a lot of physics. And he said, would you consider, because it sounds like a lot of the things that you're talking about, they're right in line with like being an acoustical consultant, because that's essentially what they do. They analyze rooms, they analyze building constructions, and they make sure that they're appropriate for the context of the occupant, right? Mm-hmm. I went through that whole discussion, and it was it was like very refreshing, and like, I want to learn more about actually like the physical properties of of sound and how it affects us, how it propagates, and how to control it.
Was there any interest in pursuing the performative side, like, or has that always just been a back burner, like something you want to know but not want to do?
Like music performance.
Yeah.
Yes and no. So where I get my like music gratification now, I would say, is when I design a space. Since I have done performance in high school and in college, and I've worked in theaters, and I understand how the end user and the performer will perceive the space and how they want to use the space. That's kind of like where I get my gratification, is like, I know that my work is positively impacting the end user, the performer, and the audience. Like, I can now say like, oh man, that concert hall that I really like, or that auditorium that I played in high school, that like, why did I really like the acoustics of that? Now I've got a better understanding of why, and I can work with other designers to make a similar experience for that high school student, for that professional musician, and they can actually play in a space that they love. And that's like where the gratification comes in.
That's huge.
Me. I don't mind if I don't get to play in the space, and I'm fine just like leaving like my music to like a more personal thing, and popping out my horn at the conferences, or like,
well, right, that's where I want to chase that a little bit. Like, where do you still find yourself before, like, when do you still feel connected most to the instrument? Like, is it just those random sessions that you bust out in your room, or when you're playing with other people? Like, where does that spark come back?
Yeah, so it's the random kind of like spritz of like, oh man, I want to play today. And then it's also the the yearly company holiday party. I crank out some Christmas tunes with my boss and my coworkers, and we're just like jamming with a bunch of the invitees, and it's great.
So I find that I've been contacting you a lot lately about the Spanish language. I'm trying to learn a lot of Spanish. I'm trying to learn a base level amount of Spanish, just because I want to flex my creative muscle. I just want to exercise my brain a little bit. And I'm now in a bigger city where it would be more useful in a way that it never really has. So it's been fun to learn through Duolingo. You have, it seems, an ability to learn things very quickly when you're actually interested in it, which I kind of attributed to this podcast in a way because of my tendency to hyperfixate on things through ADHD. And I actually introduced this podcast in kind of a new way now, in that it's called the A.D.H.Deep-Dive. But it's not about ADHD. It's just full of proof that it exists. Because, like, we're going to be talking about something like acoustical consulting, but then we'll bounce back to our childhood, and, just it could be whatever. But I just talk to people I find creatively relatable in a way. When you decide that you want to learn something, you go all in. So whether it's the trombone, the tuba, the trumpet, the Spanish language, the actual physical side of acoustics, like, and how a room can be made. All of that must be fulfilling to a certain degree. But when are you unfulfilled creatively? Like, when you're in a lull, what does that look like? What are you thinking about when you're in, like, Do you understand? Maybe I'm not
Yeah, no,
articulating properly.
I get where you're coming from. I have to put some thought into this one. Um, when I'm gonna, yeah, that's a tricky one. Because what does one do? I think a lot of folks have like their own specific things that they do, and maybe not necessarily to bring them out of the lull, but to make the impact less drastic, I would say.
Yeah.
I don't know. So all right, this sounds very like boring and very like office jobby.
Don't even hit me.
But like when I'm working on a report, like say I visited a site and I'm doing like a follow-up report for a client. And there are times when I'm like, okay, I've done all this data analyses and I've done all these calculations to do this, come up with a recommendation. And then I'm like, okay, now I've got to sit down and write the report. Oftentimes I get into like the first paragraph and I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can write this report. I'm not in my right mindset. I would say that's maybe like the most creative lull that I get into nowadays, at least with my job.
Specifically,
And,
do you ever feel like imposter syndrome in what you do? Does that ever hit you?
Every day.
Okay, that's kind of where I want to point it. Like that's a big theme in my creative pursuit. Is just constantly feeling like I am not actually good at what I do. Like how does that hit you? How do you deal with imposter syndrome in your field specifically? Or just in your head specifically, maybe not just in your field, but
well, thankfully I've got great mentors at my work.
good.
And they're very supportive. And if I feel like I'm in like a position like, oh man, I don't understand what's going on here. Like, okay, let's like work it out. I've never felt imposter syndrome to an extent where I felt like I didn't belong.
Interesting.
And I largely attribute that to my mentors because, we all go through the same thing. Like sometimes we don't have the answers. Sometimes it takes time to like arrive at an answer. And so I kind of attribute that imposter syndrome to, okay, I don't have this answer yet, and that's okay. We've got to like work to get to that level. And so when I get into those, mindsets where I feel like I'm not good enough to be here, I kind of take a step back and say, well, hold on. You are in the same shoes that someone else 20 years ago who has a bunch more experience in the field than you do was in. They were going through the same thing. So it's like you've got to like work to step the appropriate steps before actually getting to a place where you're entirely comfortable in your own space. And I don't let it get me too down. I mean, it's there, and I think that's okay. I don't know. That's probably not a great answer, but
no, so it is not my answer, but it's still a good answer. I think my only, I don't know if it's a follow-up question or if it's a rebuttal, but it seems, well, first of all, it's really good to know that is your answer because that's admirable. Like you have a healthy approach to it. You don't let the creative process destroy you. The way that I really struggle with imposter syndrome is like, I guess it can be tied to how you, let me try and rephrase this. Imposter syndrome for me is like a crippling feeling that like on the one hand, I know I know when I'm feeling imposter syndrome. Like, I recognize it while it's happening. Your approach is push that away. Like, don't even acknowledge that. Like, it's gonna get done. I don't know that I can do that. Like, it's just so present there at all times, whether it's when I'm on stage playing the drums, whether it's when I'm directing or I'm acting or I'm shooting. Like, there is a nervousness, and it's all confidence, right? Like, it's all just, but you hear about people who have been in their fields for decades who still feel like, I'm shit. I'm faking it every step of the way. We're all faking it. Like, I don't know, that doesn't ever cripple you. Like, that never like haunts you, the idea that like one day I might be found out. Well, you know what? I guess I don't even want to project that onto you, because if you don't feel that way, then you don't feel that way, and you shouldn't feel that way. Just tell me your secret.
I'm gonna call you a week from now and be like, dude, you know that podcast you had me on?
I feel like a failure, man. I feel like a failure.
No, I know what you're. Yeah, I completely get it, and I know. I mean, I know people who go through this, and I feel maybe bad to an extent that I haven't experienced it to such an extreme level.
Don't feel bad for it, but
I just yeah, I don't know. I think imposter syndrome for me is just feeling that like things aren't definite, and that's okay for me, and I just kind of like plow through, and I don't want to like I don't say that to like discredit any other one, any other person's perception of what imposter syndrome is. I think it's just like that is, and maybe it's not imposter syndrome, maybe it's a completely different thing, in which case I don't know if I've experienced it to like a large, crippling extent.
One of the reasons that I would have to imagine that imposter syndrome is at least you're able to keep imposter syndrome at bay is that you said you do kind of surround yourself with mentors. You are always around people who know a little bit more than you. Is that correct?
Yeah.
How important is that to you? Do you feel like
huge?
Yeah.
I get into problems at work where I look at this issue and I'm like, I've never seen this. I don't know how to address this. And so I got to like take a step back. Okay. Take a look at the literature. Okay. Is the literature there on how to address this issue? Well, yeah, it is, but I want someone else's kind of like experience on this. So, I'll like ask one of my mentors and they'll say, oh yeah, we've dealt with this numerous occasions. Here are like, 3 different projects where we've run into the same thing. It's going to be like a tricky thing to address, but here are some different viewpoints to look at it. What was the initial question? Sorry.
It's not even really a question. Just like, how important are these mentors to you? Like what value do they bring to you?
So being able to like draw from their past experiences and apply it to my own projects is huge. It's invaluable because they give such a deeper insight than I would otherwise have if I just had to rely on the books and like looking or reading someone's approach to an issue. I can have a direct dynamic conversation with them and kind of talk through the issue and like, oh, okay, yeah, I didn't realize that there was this one specific detail in your project. How does that, how do we change that past experience to directly apply to my situation? So I think that is where the value lies. The other part of this is, I consider them my friends as well. They're several, many years older than I am, but they're like great company to have around. I mean, they're fun to be around, and I think that really like kind of uplifts me to an extent. Like,
Yeah.
it's just a good place to be. And I think without my mentors there, it would be like significantly less good.
I think the reason that I wanted you to at least touch on that is I imagine I'm talking to, I don't have my audience yet, but as far as some of my YouTube followers go, it's a lot of freelancers.
Yeah.
So people who are trying to pursue their passions, they're directly tied to their financials or their finances. And so if they're in a creative lull, or if they feel like they are failing in any particular way, that reflects on their finances as well. And then when you start seeing yourself as a creative failure and a financial failure, that's when the imposter syndrome really weighs in on you. And when you're doing it by yourself as a freelancer, it's really easy to fall into that hole and then just like look at yourself as a piece of garbage creatively. So, I want to take you at face value by saying to whatever listener that it is important to surround yourself with people that you admire, that can teach you a lot teach you a lot about the particular thing that you're interested in. Like, there's always more to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And like, running the show by yourself is a lot of stress that like a lot of us cannot manage. So, yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to ask about your mentor. Were you about to say something? Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No. I agree. I think it's important to have people in your life, and they don't necessarily have to have like more experience than you or anything like that. I've got a lot of folks in my world who are not, they don't have the same experience that I do even, and I consider them like very important relationships to have, because they can still offer like a different perspective, and they can still be there for you in a way that you can't be there for yourself.
Now, this can be about your business, or it can be about anything creative that you've pursued in general. Where have you failed creatively? Like, what was your biggest creative failure in that something that you really stood up for your idea,
Mm-hmm.
only to be proven wrong in the end?
Ooh, proven wrong?
Maybe not. Well, sure. Yeah. Proven wrong, or just where it was a failure. Your idea was because I really do believe in success being an important part of, or failure being an important part of success. So this is not slanderous.
No. I totally understand. I totally understand where you're coming from. Let me try to come up with a specific example.
Are you too perfect? Have you never failed?
No, the thing is, in my work, I mean, I got a lot of peers who do this, and I'm sorry, I keep going back to my work. This is just like the
No, it's okay. It's what you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's what I know. But I've got a lot of great colleagues who are like also reviewing my work and saying like, hey, I think you missed this detail here, or I missed you missed this, or maybe you don't want to suggest this approach because this approach is probably going to be a better result. So I think I've got a lot of my stuff is like peer reviewed necessarily.
Checked.
Yeah, it has to be. And so I don't run into that so often, but I have had instances where, like I mentioned, we didn't include the sound absorptive treatments that you recommended for the space, and now we have a problem with speech intelligibility in the space, and so in that case, I mean, I can provide those recommendations, and if they don't do it, then it's not really my failure, right? Because
sure.
So anyway, let me try to think of a better example. And I'm sorry, this question might just need to be.
You don't have to have failed, man.
No, I do. That's the thing, but it's like hard to like come up with a specific.
Don't listen. I have asked you. I have projected onto you this whole podcast. I want I'm literally like ripping negativity out of you, like feed the algorithm of depression and imposter syndrome. But if that is not who you are, that's why you are an interesting guest to me. Like, you have been able to pursue so many different avenues and have found relative success in all of them, that to me it's like, these are the types of people that I want to have on the podcast. I don't have to just relate to you because you feel crippled by your inability to project confidence. You pursue your passions, you surround yourself with creative people, you surround yourself with what's the word I'm looking for? Like encourageable people who will lift you up. Like, that's huge to the creative process, and I think myself and others should follow that more often. Like, you really don't have to have failed,
Yeah. I mean, but the thing is that it's there. It's just difficult for me to find like a specific example that I think would be worthwhile. And
well, then let's turn it more positively, because there is a second half of that. When did you put it all out on the line for an idea and it was a really good idea? Like, when did you feel most creatively successful? I don't know. I don't deal with a lot of success in my job.
I don't deal with a lot of success. No, let's see. What would be a good example of that? Like, this is going back a number of years, but and this sounds very like maybe not so applicable, but I think one of the moments where I felt like, dang, that actually worked out pretty well, was actually like when I was looking for a job.
Post-college?
Post-college. And I you remember Mrs. Phillip, right? Phillips?
Miss Phil, yeah.
Miss Phil, yeah.
Yeah.
And wait, was it in her class? I think it was in her class.
Was it Phil or Bernie?
We did like the boast, where you had to boast about yourself. You had to like brag about yourself.
Was this in AP?
No, this was not an AP. I never took AP English.
Okay. Oh, you didn't?
No.
Okay. Then I don't remember that. But
so yeah,
I'm taking your word for it.
There was this assignment where you had to like literally like brag about yourself.
Now, quick thing I do remember in Miss Phil's class that it's funny that you're saying that you would have to get up and boast about yourself, because she would also do that if you had the hiccups.
Oh.
If you had hiccups in her class, she would make you stand in front of the class and have everyone stare at you while you just look at them.
Oh.
Until your hiccups go away. And then you go sit down.
That's interesting, because like doesn't fright or nervousness like help hiccups go away?
I don't know the science, but that's what she did.
Wow.
So the fact that she makes you boast about yourself is no surprise to me. But go ahead.
Yeah. So I remember that assignment very fondly, and now thinking back on it, I think that is like a huge part of getting the gigs and things that you want, because you have to know how to like pick out your strong suits, not focus on the negative, but just like, okay, I did this really cool thing, let's put that on whatever it is, if it's like a reel or if it's like a resume, whatever you want to like, whatever the context is. And so learning to just be able to like pick out the positive things about me, not focus on the negatives, I think was very helpful in my pursuit for a job post-college. A lot of people were saying, Zach, to get into acoustics, you're going to need a graduate degree. And you should really be looking at grad programs. And I was like, you know what? It's October. I've got like 6 months to graduate. I've got time. I'm just going to like put a few applications out there, like just test the waters, And much to my surprise, I picked out like kind of like the highlights. I was like, okay. And when I was writing cover letters, I wanted to make myself seem like a very like a very good, like I'm doing good things in the world, right?
Sure.
And I don't think that's a bad thing. Like it
No.
seems very narcissistic and very like
No.
very like egotistical.
No. To
But
be proud of yourself, that's not.
yeah, and so it takes a while to get above that, like
Mhm.
those aspects, like, okay, this is like a bad thing, to no, this is actually beneficial to the progress that I want to pursue, right? Um, so I think once I got past that, it was like, I put out a few applications out, and I little did I know, little did I know, by doing that, I could get like a bunch of interviews, and that eventually led to my move out to the West Coast. And
Super cool.
so being able to like leverage the things that even don't necessarily apply directly to what I want to do, that in turn, like it helped me out. Like I focused a lot also on my abilities in Spanish, and like, hey, during college, I went out on a limb. I studied in Colombia without really knowing anything about the country. I studied in Uruguay without knowing really anything about the country, and I put myself on a goal to become fluent in Spanish. And and that's not really relevant to what I do on the daily,
Yeah, but
but
it takes ambition.
it also, yeah, it shows the ambitious side, and it also just like, people, they care about what you can do professionally and what you can do for them, but I think you can tell a lot more about yourself in things that you do outside of that world, and people like to see that. And in my case, I think it worked out for the best. And I yeah, I don't know if that like strayed too far from your
No, that's great.
initial question, but
No, what you're doing that I really like about you as a guest is that, like I said, I'm projecting the negativity towards you, and you are spinning it in a positive direction and spitting it back out. I'm realizing that I need to approach it in a different way.
no,
Like,
well, that's not my goal either.
but I know. Don't sell yourself short. I'm saying your answers, whether intentional or unintentional, are wise, and like. I think some key takeaways from this are, first of all, the mentor thing. Like, surrounding yourself with people who are interested in the same kinds of things you're interested in, just being able to bounce ideas off someone and learn from them. Also, the way that you talk about yourself is very important. The way that you think about yourself creatively, or just in a business sense. Like, if you project confidence, that's going to resonate with other people, and you're going to start subconsciously believing these things about yourself as well. So this fear that you have of sounding narcissistic or egotistical is unwarranted, because like it really is refreshing to hear someone give themselves praise when pursuing the creative arts, because a lot of people go into creative fields with a lot of baggage. And they don't really let any of that go. And yes, we tend to use it as a muse, but we also let it kind of use us in a different way as well. Like our art, we try to manifest our art in a way that is relevant to some of the trauma that we've experienced. But if we let the trauma kind of control us, then like our work's always going to be about the bad stuff.
Yeah.
We don't need that. So a way I want to phase this out is, first of all, by telling you that I love you and I miss you.
Oh, thanks. I love you
and
too.
It's so
man.
good to see you, buddy.
Well, we'll have to get
is
a
there-
drink next time I'm around.
Yes, please. I was gonna say the last time I bumped into you was mysteriously in Michigan, like just when bars and businesses were starting to back up or open back up from the pandemic. So I was like, what? What are you doing here?
I tend to come in unannounced.
It was great. It was such an unexpected surprise. So is there anything that you want to plug? Do you have any projects out there that you'd like to direct people towards? Is maybe your business? Like, is there anything?
Oh, follow Zak's coffee review.
Yeah, okay. Oh, you know what? Let's get into that real quick before we go. I really want to talk about that before we go. Oh man, I'm gonna have to have you back because that's I kind of forgot going into this that was a big thing I want to talk about. But we'll give a small little pitch here. Zak.
Go.
Zak's ZAKS coffee review on Instagram. Please give your little pitch about what you do on there because I am loving watching that.
Oh, it's like it's nothing really.
Stop it.
No,
What is it?
I seriously. So I don't know. Like, I was super into coffee as a college student, except I didn't really have like the time or the money or the tools to like really get super into it. And then I got out of college and then I stopped drinking coffee for like 2 years. And then a friend visited me and he gifted me a bag of coffee beans. And I'm like, I don't have a grinder. I need to buy a grinder to like even enjoy this. And I haven't drank coffee in like 2 years. What is this? And then that interaction was like, oh man, you know what? You really want to get back into coffee. Like
Nice.
You really want to get back into coffee. So now most of my free time, energy, and money is spent on coffee equipment, good coffee.
A big espresso machine. He does.
An espresso machine. I've got a lot of pour over devices. I've got a lot of really good coffee that I've tried. Actually, in October, I did a trip to Colombia where I did a little coffee tourism.
Nice.
Which was a lot of fun.
Straight from Colombia.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. That was.
I'm sure the culture out there
great.
was insane.
Yeah.
The coffee culture.
I love that country. If I were to live anywhere else in the world, it'd probably be Colombia.
Hell yeah.
But anyway, I don't know. The Reels thing, I've been doing that recently. Just
so yeah,
like,
your Instagram, that's what I've been watching. Your Instagram Reels on Zak's coffee review. It's been it looks like you've got a cinematic eye. You know how to compose an image.
I just watch other people's reels and then I'm like, oh, that shot's pretty cool. Like let's do that.
That's how all art is created. Cinematographers at one point saw, some of Quentin Tarantino's best films and we try to imitate that and then it becomes our own thing. But I'm saying you have an understanding of what a good image looks like. And your Instagram Reels, at least, I don't know if you're on TikTok in that way. I don't do TikTok.
I'm not on TikTok. No.
Woo! High five! Yeah.
Well, hold on. Let me clarify. I do have a TikTok account.
Take it back.
Because all right. Because I love. I don't know. I get into these. It's usually like late at night when I'm going to bed. And I'm just like scrolling through, and there's a lot of hilarious stuff on there. There's a lot of useful stuff on there. There's a lot of like inspirational stuff on there. There's a lot of shitty stuff on there. Oh, I'm not allowed to say that. There's a lot of crappy stuff on there.
No, it's all right. I'm keeping in both words just so you can be humiliated by your by your correction.
Okay, all right. But it's. So I think there is useful things on there, and yes, to an extent, I feel like a trashy millennial who's just on TikTok, but that said, the amount of times I am you started Spanish classes and you're like, oh, I'm going to think of Zak right now and I'm going to contact him for some help on this. And I think it was largely due to the fact that you were studying Spanish, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So I have a similar experience with TikTok and Reels, where I'm scrolling through the feed and then I see something and I'm like, this reminds me of this person I haven't talked to in 3 years. I'm going to send them this video. And it's cool because then it like kind of reactivates a relationship that you know, maybe haven't forgotten about, but it's just gone to the wayside for whatever reason.
Tapped into your nostalgia.
Yeah.
So Zak's coffee review on Instagram. That is where
Zak's
you're putting out
review.
your creative non-musical content. And then Zak L'Italien as the acoustical consultant will put your little your qualifications in the description.
Yeah, there you go.
You go ahead and hang out on the line, but as an official ending, yes, again, I do want to say I love you and I miss you, and it's so good to see your face, buddy.
Love you and miss you too, man. It's great to see you.